Good morning, everybody. Okay, so on the claim of fact speech, there was an advocate who claimed that the Dodgers will make it to the World Series for a third time in a row. Their supporting claims were, if the Dodgers can keep up their RPG and their position of being National League West champions, then they will continue the streak of going to the World Series. Their second claim was a recent trade with the players, and their third claim was that losing 2 years in a row is a bigger motivation to go to the World Series than those who have won. Now let's take a clear look and see as to why the Dodgers may possibly have a low chance of winning the World Series this season. The supporting claims are: 1. The best indicator for a baseball team to win the World Series is a run differential. 2. To win the World Series, the Dodgers should not have traded the sale plug. And 3. Winning the World Series once can greatly motivate the team to win the World Series the following season. Now let's jump to what the advocate first stated to support their claim. They stated that if the Dodgers can keep up their RPG and their position of being National League West champions, then they will continue the streak of going to the World Series. The advocate is claiming that a RPG is an indicator that helps a team enter and win the World Series, but as a matter of fact, the best indicator is a run differential. For those who don't know, RPG stands for runs per game, and it measures the average number of runs a team makes per game. According to the Capitalist News Service journalist Connor Mount, claims that the most important predictor of a team's success for winning the World Series is a run differential, meaning that the team needs to score more than the other team. So in terms of the Baseball Reference and team rankings in the 2018 season, the Dodgers stood on a run differential of 193 and a winning percentage of 0.564%. Compared to the World Series champion, the Boston Red Sox had a run differential of 270 and a winning percentage of 0.66%. Now transitioning to the second supporting claim, the advocate claimed that the recent trading of players Matt Kim and Yasiel Puig was good for the defensive aspect, but as a matter of fact, the trade of Yasiel Puig greatly impacts the team. According to a baseball enthusiast, Jacob Render claims that Puig was a great baseball player in terms of defense and was a bad decision of trading him. In 2018, Puig was one of the most offensive right fielders in baseball, particularly on balls hit in his zone. On this season, he finished 6th among Major League right fielders in revised zone rating and 11th in defensive USA. Puig is irreplaceable. A.J. Pollock is not as great as a defender because he is not a right fielder, and Bryce Harper nor Alex Verdugo will make up the difference completely. Now going on to the last supporting claim, if a team would like to win the World Series, their motivation would come from being previous champions. According to the advocate, they stated that losing 2 years in a row is a bigger motivation to go to the World Series than those who have won. But that is not the case. According to USA Today, they claim that having a team repeatedly become champion for the second time in a row can actually happen, since the 1998 Yankees were the last team to win at least 119 games, and they won 3 consecutive World Series. An unfinished business mentality is not that motivating for a team compared to the team who just won the championship. According to Grenade Louge, a personal writer of the Buckets, claims that people always respond and do a better job when they are working towards something they want, also known as positive motivation. Therefore, in conclusion, the Dodgers may not be able to enter or even win the World Series because their motivation is not as high as the team who won the World Series this past season. Yasiel Puig was such an important player for the team. And 3, in order to enter and win the World Series, the run differential has to be high. Thank you.
All right, well, you kind of review what the secondary claims were, then you preview what your claims are going to be, and then you start making the argument. It's probably a little more setup than is necessary. You can just tell us what your responses are going to be as you get to the individual points. I thought that it was very easy to follow. You explained the ideas as you got to each point. You suggested counter causality on the first point, that it's not RPGs that matter, it's the run differential that matters, and you had a good piece of information about the run differential with the Red Sox, for instance, versus the Dodgers. What's interesting, though, is that since we're talking about them returning to the series, not even necessarily winning the series, but returning to the series for a third year in a row, you'd have to, I think, a comparison between the Dodgers and other teams in the National League would make the most sense. So you're doing a comparison to the team that they played in the World Series, but not necessarily the ones that they have to beat to get to the World Series. So I think you've got a good piece of information here, but it needs to be utilized a little bit differently. On the trade issue, you did a pretty good job explaining what the impact of the loss of Puig is going to be, and how he ranked in comparison to other players. Some of this is a little subjective and it's speculative, but you did a good job trying to present evidence to support the position that you have. I do think that because you're trying to stick to exclusively the arguments that the advocate presented, that you missed some other opportunities to talk about why the Dodgers might be handicapped making it back to the series this year, including injuries to their pitching staff, which, pitching is an important part of the process also. And I know that you're just focusing on the hitting because that's what the advocate focused on. But sometimes you need the broader perspective, because you're asking us to believe this one thing. The advocate's asking us to believe this one thing based on just this one dimension here. But if they've ignored all these other dimensions that there are arguments on, I think that's a valid place for you to make some progress in challenging their point. The motivation issue is okay. We do get references to the last time that anybody won 3 World Series in a row. How about teams that played in 2 World Series and lost, making it back in a third year? I don't know if we have any history of that sort of thing happening. We do have history with the Dodgers. They did make 2 World Series in a row, lost both of those World Series, and then didn't appear in the World Series again for 4 or 5 years after that. So, there's historical reference that you could use as well. But I thought that you had a pretty good argument here. I kind of understand the dependence on the notes, because you're looking at a material that you're not particularly familiar with, and you're having to rely on the quotes and the statistics to make your point. But it's sort of the same problem that we had with Ivan. You're not really talking to us, you're just presenting the data. And it's good data, and it's explained pretty well. But I think it could be more effectively presented, and you'd be more convincing if you just kind of looked at us a bit more. And I know it's unfamiliar territory. That's probably a big part of the process. Say, well, let me just get to the stuff that I've got here and hope for the best. All right, thank you.